Okay, here we are. Let's finish the connection thing. Okay, good to go. So, welcome to another session. This is a special session. It's a fireside chat with before the future of VR, AR, and metaverse. And in this fireside chat, we have Carey Souza, founder and CEO of Active Connect. You were two-time founder, and you are also an aspiring author. You wrote a AI for game, and you're also passionate about AI's impact on human performance and health. And let's say that the sparring partner or general partner is Rafael. I don't know if the pronunciation is Jabulani Brown, CEO and co-founder of Symbol Zero and Chiro Strato. You are a game designer, developer, studio head, XR cloud entrepreneur, VR lecturer, XR admin. You are an evangelist for Roblox virtual console developer, and also you are the Microsoft regional director. So, guys, now the stage is yours. Please goes on introducing yourself and your expertise, and have a lot of fun. And I invite people to interact through chat, Q&A, and raise their hand.
Great, awesome. Thank you, Fabrizio. Morning, Rafael. It's. I was going to say it's nice and sunny in California, but it's a bit foggy behind me. But it's a beautiful day, nevertheless. So, very interesting topic where we've been talking about this for a while now. One of the things I wanted to get on right away and get on and get some sort of clarity on was that there's a lot of definitions going on about AR, VR, and what actually is the metaverse. I mean, I've seen omniverse floating around there, spatial web, and I think a lot of people sort of conflate these two terms. Would love to hear your take on that, and and you've been heavily involved in this. You've been involved in AR and VR and game space for the last 20 odd years. You've worked with John Carmack at ID Software, Electronic Arts. That's where we met. We worked, and then since then you've gone on to work on some fantastic games and titles. So perhaps maybe we kick it off by you giving us your thoughts on what you think the metaverse is and how it relates to spatial web.
Sure. So first off, I love XR. The AR, VR, MR range as we go towards XR and extended realities is a fantastic thing. I think that it's one of several baby steps that we're doing to get towards the metaverse. Spatial computing is another piece. Cloud is another. AI is another. All these things are getting towards the metaverse. And so the thing that I always go back to with the metaverse is that's a notion that comes out of science fiction. Comes out of William Gibson with things like Neuromancer and Neil Stephenson with Snow Crash, and taking those. Having them be adopted by academia back in the 90s, before the technology was really ready, and frankly, it served as inspiration for those of us like you and I in the game industry, who were building early 3D in the 90s and the 2000s, waiting for all this stuff to be ready, and building some of the early examples to get to this. And so when I come to the metaverse, it's a thing that we're trying to reach. It's an aspirational thing that we're still defining. In some respects, it's easiest to say what it is not, and to look at a vision for what it is, because the metaverse isn't right around the corner. It's not next month or next year, but it's a thing that we're going to reach at some point. Just as you can look back to the 80s and go, hey, we're going to reach the World Wide Web. The metaverse is a notion of a real-time 3D online persistent connected thing where we can feel like we're there. It's not offline, it's not video, it's not 2D, it's not text. I love all of those. I'm going to continue using all of those, but metaverse is about being there. VR is one of the pieces to get to it, but the metaverse is this connected thing that we know that we can eventually make. And that's also why many of us have gone off to make games, is trying to get to that metaverse.
No, I think that's That's fantastic. Thank you for that. And you mentioned an interesting term, extended reality. And I think my foray into this had been in 2012 when one of my first startups was creating a surgical simulator which allowed doctors and surgeons around the world to basically practice surgery using AR, available AR at that time, to sort of speed up the whole training process. And one of the biggest challenges back then was technology was the biggest. Even the concept was, I think we were getting there, but the biggest challenges for me at least was the technology available and the pace at which was being developed. Curious, I mean, I know you've been heavily involved, and curious to know if you've seen massive gains in technology, or what in your mind are some of the challenges? Because I know there's tons I still face, and there's a lot more to be done.
Mhm.
But it'd be great to see what you think are the challenges.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that the tricky thing with the hardware, and hopefully this is better. The tricky thing with the hardware is that on the one hand, it sometimes feels like the hardware advances at incredible rates, and at the same time, the hardware needs to move at a pace where the reality is that it always takes longer to get to that finished, polished thing than we think. I mean, I can remember Micah Brash back in 2014 at Steam Dev Days talking about how we would be
Yeah.
reaching peak VR in about 5 years, and that was in 2014, and in 20 I think it was 2019, he's no longer at Valve. He's instead at heading up Facebook, Reality Labs, up in Seattle, the R&D group, and he's basically going, I've learned some of my lessons, and AR is not an around the corner thing. I learned that with VR. He's instead going, we're going to hit where we need to be with AR in 10 years. We start to realize it just takes time.
It does, and it's kind of funny because when I was talking to people in 2012, and we had a prototype of our AR engine to do the surgical simulator. I mean, just about everybody. First of all, the pushback I got was that, look, AI is not going anywhere. It's a done thing. It's not really going anywhere. Um, and then as I go into 2014, 2015, it started making a resurgence with I think John Carmack, and when he joined Facebook with the Oculus Rift, I think he had a big part to play. And I know you worked with John quite a bit, and I
Oh
think
yeah.
that popularized or brought back AR and VR. And I think Samsung got into the fray with their VR goggles. And I remember talking to somebody out here, and they're the first Samsung VR headsets. So that was pretty cool. But going forward, I mean, I think with hardware being where it is right now, and in the way at the rate it's accelerating, do you foresee foresee a place where you have specialized hardware, just like you're already getting chips that are specialized to perform uh, AI processes? Do you think there's going to be a VR chip, like specifically a VR chip or a AR chip, which is for complete 3D spatial computing and nothing else? Is that something you think where the industry should head, or you think is
Right,
that
right.
something we want to do?
Um, so I think it's a good question. I think that we don't really need a VR chip. I mean, GPUs basically do that. Um,
Right.
I think that the key really is not to have a VR chip or an AR chip, as much as to to take lessons from, like, we tried to have a physics chip back in the AG, a physics chip back in the early
Yes,
2000s.
I
We've tried
remember
to have
that.
audio chips. The thing that we need more, so we need sometimes specialized versions of CPUs that can run in clusters on clouds. But especially for local devices, a GPU to render and a CPU to coordinate everything else is pretty much good enough. What is going to help, frankly, is continued. So not like a spatial chip, but you've got Broadcom and Qualcomm working on having more precise modems, being able to track your exact kind of home position, and then have enough ancillary tracking around you to do hand tracking, to do voice recognition, to track multiple points of your body smoothly. That can all be done with a collection of a competent CPU, a more refined modem, and then just good cloud and edge support. So I think we're mostly going away from specialized chips, and it's much more about maybe specialized compute clusters in the cloud. And that's actually a thing I'd like to stress, is that it's not about AR cloud, it's about XR cloud.
Right.
That for any of these, AR, VR, MR, they all need cloud support. AR cloud was a thing because AR really couldn't function well without some good geospatial support. But they actually all need cloud support to be able to reach their potential. Um, and because otherwise it's just a little bit of input and a rendering device. I mean, I can
Right.
remember looking at the first, Palmer Luckey's first, duct tape and sealing wax device on John Carmack's desk back in 2011, along with an array of other devices when John decided he was going to go into this. And the thing is that at that time, John was asking around, and Sony and Samsung and they were trying to figure things out, and it was the beginnings of Oculus, but HTC, Valve, everyone was going into the space at the same time. The reality is that everybody looks at what the hardware is capable of, and a bunch of smart minds, it's never one person, a bunch of smart minds collectively go, this thing is just about possible now. And so VR was just barely a thing that we could do 10 years ago. Um, Now we're getting into where AR is finally becoming just barely possible. And we have a lot of ways to go towards the metaverse. So yeah, spatial computing is on the horizon. It's getting better. But frankly, there's still a lot that we need to do with just traditional PC, console, mobile. This classic computing reality of existing devices, they actually need to push that, persistent online first, and then that stuff can go over to VR, AR, MR.
No, I agree, and I think for a truly fully immersive experience, I think it's still going to take a few cycles before we get there, where you can have a complete fully immersive. I mean, something like Ready Player One, which we saw. I'd love to be in a world where you could completely immerse yourself, or how it's described in Snow Crash, where it's a fully immersive experience, and I think we are uh, definitely a few years away from there. But one of the things which I'm personally involved in is how. So I think in a lot of these metaverses or omniverses, as you might have it, you it's going to be an extension of yourself, your personal identity into that space, and I think privacy and personal data is going to play a big role in that bit. Now, do you have you noticed this becoming more? I know everywhere you go, people are talking about privacy and data and stuff like that. But have you noticed this a lot more happening in your world when you're talking to? I know you work in some cool projects, but is this something that's a concern,
Mhm.
or is that something that we should be concerned about
Yeah.
as we start getting more immersed into this?
Yeah, yeah. So absolutely. I mean, I think the key really is that we're getting into a space where biometric data is becoming a thing, and we're, general telemetric data is still there, but biometric data, being able to capture people's body movements, their hand movements, their head movements, where they look, where their retina goes to. All of these things are important and valuable, and privacy is absolutely an issue, especially being frank, when you look at what Facebook has been doing with Oculus. On the
Right.
one hand, Facebook has been great for beating the drum of VR. On the other hand, they're basically setting up to data mine their users, and so it's wonderful that they're bringing people into VR, but I don't want to be brought into VR just to be. I don't want to just be a tool to give them data. I want people to respect our data. And frankly, beyond that, I want to be able to know what data I'm generating.
Right.
And so I think that we're already seeing this with corporations. Being frank, doing work right now in kind of the virtual concert space. Um, the partners that we have are incredibly concerned about protecting their IP. They're concerned about protecting additional data that is generated around their artists. And how is that handled? Is it secure? If they make their artist virtual, do they own and control the data of their artists? And when they bring things like their songs into a virtual space, are those protected? And so, like, I think it's kind of sad, but I'd love to see more users learn from corporations. Corporations value their data, they value their IP. Individuals and consumers should as well. We shouldn't just take a notion that because, Facebook is going to knock $100 off the price of an Oculus, that now Facebook can take anything that they want from us. Um, I would love to see any of these, frankly, Samsung, HTC, Microsoft, Sony, Facebook, and Google, any of the folks in these spaces to educate consumers about their data, to respect the data, and then to allow consumers to make choices. When do you give up your data? What data do you give it up? And to who? And when you are handing it over, are you handing it over to just them as a first party, or can they pass it off to third parties? Um, you know, it should be a transaction. The data has value to Facebook and Google. It has value to us. If Facebook and Google can build fortunes on it, they can negotiate with us and tell us when they're taking it and what value they're giving us in return.
I think that's so. So this brings us to a pretty interesting challenge, and something which again I'm very heavily involved in is how do we interact with these massively online environments where you want a very personalized experience. That I'm assuming if you've got a good VR cloud, virtual cloud-based environment, you definitely want a very personal experience. But at the same time, you don't want too much of your identifiable data up there. And one of the things I've been working on with some fantastic folks is developing a federated system where you just create a model, and so there's no personally identifiable information. You just that model just goes and represents you. So in that metaverse or in that virtual environment, you are still able to interact as you without exposing too much of a personally identifiable data. And I think that might be the future, because I know there's some brilliant people like Andrew Trusk, who's heading this with OpenAI, and one of his goals is to basically get to some sort of a system where you're freely able to enjoy the benefits of being online, because I think more and more we are going to be spending, I think, majority of our time online collecting information, learning, without compromising your personal data.
Yeah.
So I think that, yeah, I would like to see a world where you're still able to enjoy the benefits of a Google search engine or the benefits of Oculus VR without giving up too much of your personal data to them. But at the same time, they also need your personal data to basically sort of create a very personalized experience for you. So it's a bit of a give and take on both.
Well, and see, this is where there can actually be some amount of partnership if they can navigate this well between device manufacturers and software platforms. And some of them are both, many of them are both. But the device that you are connecting with, whether it's an iPad or an Android phone or it's a VR headset or an AR, or it's a personal computer, any number of future devices that we haven't conceived of yet. The device needs to um, detect and determine your personal identifiable data, um, and then it needs to be able to navigate and say, okay, now I'm going to, like, the user has set what data can go to who, and when this device handshakes with a platform, it knows what to pass on. There needs to be a responsible understanding of the data. And being frank, like, this is part of what we're seeing with Apple and Facebook right now, of this kind of navigation that got pushed to iOS 14.5 of
Right.
like, but it's amusing that like, the money aside, that people are struggling over this issue of just informing users, you know, inform the user what data is being recorded, let them choose, let them decide what you push. If you do that, you're going to build more trust with the users. I trust Apple, frankly. Like, I don't trust any corporation wholly about anything, but I
Right.
trust Apple more than Facebook in the last little while, not because of some, narrative, but because Apple says, we're going to force everyone to tell me what data they're taking. I want to be able to choose. I would love it if Facebook would learn that, because it's not about them being bad. Corporations aren't bad or good. They're just doing their interest and sometimes what they are pushed to do by consumers. And I think in this next while, we're going to see that if they're going to be in a space where they gather biometric data, and I'm not, hammering just on Facebook, because they all have issues, but Facebook is putting itself in the crosshairs of this over and over again in the last year and a half. If you're going to gather biometric data, tell the users, give them choices. Don't force them to opt in. Build trust such that they want to stay with you, that they trust you to be a good partner. Because in the
I,
end,
I
it's about building into an ecosystem where you go, I like this thing, it suits my needs, it is configured about how I want it to be, because what you want to get to is that Ready Player One moment where you just go, I put on the helmet, I put on the visor, I put on the suit, boom, I'm in. And you don't want to sit there and click through and configure a bunch of things. You want it to all be there. You want it to all work. You want the easy
Raf, I
button
think we
for
might have lost you video.
extended realities. Oh, sorry.
I can still hear you. Um, this brings me to a very interesting sort of topic, which is there's a specialized hardware for AR and XR, but there's also, I mean, the world is full of different types of hardware, different types of OSs, and in your experience, I mean, how do we create an XR experience which is sort of uniform? For example, if I'm logging in from an Android device, and somebody's logging in from an iOS device, and somebody's logging from a Windows device or Linux or whatever. Right now, some of the things that I'm seeing is that there is still a big difference in the type of experience a person uh, on iOS has versus a type of experience a person on Android has. And I think it's going to be important for us to get to a point where there's at least 80 to 90% of the experience in the metaverse or in the virtual cloud is sort of same. Uh, you think that is something that's going to happen outside of specialized hardware, outside of having VR headsets? Do you think that's something people might start looking at putting on devices, like actual devices we use versus
Yeah.
buying hardware?
Yeah. So I think you know, there's some folks that go, hey, WebXR. The web is wonderful, but the web is not the metaverse. And I don't think that the web is the path to the metaverse, but the web is the direction to the metaverse. And what I mean by that is that the web is an open collection of standards that everyone can connect to and understand, and the web is made for 2D text and video. We need, not like Web 3.0, we need Metaverse, 0.5. I'm hoping that OpenXR is a bit of that, and there are a lot of good people and companies working around OpenXR. But it's creating open standards for a cloud-connected and spatial computing thing, for a virtual, real-time 3D thing that we don't have yet. And so that's part of why I say that the metaverse is still down the road, because we're trying to get to that. We are at this kind of proto-metaverse stage where we're figuring out the standards and the devices and the technology to get to this thing. But we're not there yet because we can't, there's only some of our existing technologies we can only take so far. The metaverse is down the road. Mouse and keyboard will not get us there. We're going to have to be waving our arms around and our heads in spatial computing.
It's almost like we interact with it like we're interacting with another live being. And I know companies are working on spatial browsers, and it's almost like we need a XR operating system where whatever you do in that
Yeah.
is designed for spatial computing. How I mean, this is another super interesting topic for me. The role that AI is going to play in developing some of these things we talked about. And I've been talking to a couple of companies where they're already working on sort of self-creating or self-evolving environments within the metaverse, which I thought was a fantastic concept. And I think they're heavily using AI, where they start with the basic building blocks. I think it takes me back to the game Spore, where you create the basic building blocks, and I think and the environment starts shaping up based on how those basic elements interact. You think that's got any legs? I mean, it's a very interesting topic, and it's definitely with some of the grand visions people have on creating virtual worlds. I think AI will have to play a big role, but how how much of it is sort of managed versus completely unsupervised, and you let AI run into it and build stuff out for us. You think that that's something we're going to see soon, or is that something you've seen already?
I think we're seeing the beginnings of it. I think that you're seeing people start to think. There are many areas of of AI research. One is virtual beings, and I think that virtual beings brings a great deal of interest, several interesting technologies together. But it's kind of funny because if you look back at the traditional game space, like you take you know, if you take a game that's in development in the last 25 years, you often see pretty consistently that, if you go into a profiler, that AI takes up about 5 to 10% of the rendering
Right.
of your your system. Um, Running AI on device is a recipe for running really simple AI. Like for 25 years, we built state machines because that's what you can run. Um, the vast, you put a little bit towards physics, a little bit towards AI, a little bit towards sound, a little bit towards the game state, a little bit towards several things, and you've got a lot, you've got a big pie, but you've got a lot of pieces, and the biggest piece of the pie goes towards rendering the graphics. And so the biggest change that we're seeing is pushing the AI to the cloud and allowing the AI to grow to where it can take up, where you can run vast simulations or nested simulations within simulations on the cloud, where you can go, oh, I'm running AI, I'm running different simulations or different processes for a whole host of things that are all feeding into the virtual persistent world that I've created here. The whole point of AI growing is that it needs to be on the cloud. It will learn better on the cloud. It will be better able to compare and contrast across sessions, learn what users need. But the main thing is just that the processing needs to be there.
Right.
And
Yeah, and I
and
think
so
companies like Nvidia are already making strides towards that.
yes,
I think Microsoft's also
absolutely.
working on creating a very specific infrastructure just to support AI on the cloud. And this is something we talked about in the past, and this. I know we are running out of time. I definitely want to allow the audience to come in and ask us some questions, but beyond games and entertainment, I mean, I personally think that this has got a massive XR and building metaverses has got a massive implication on human performance beyond games. And one of the things that I've been going back and forth on this is if you look at pure human performance, you could literally create environments or virtual environments where you could feed in certain variables and see what the likely outcome might be, and be that for a simulation of a game, be that for a medical simulation. Do you see a lot of that happening? Because I know right now there's a lot of focus on I know there's some architectural 3D walkthrough stuff that's happening, but beyond that, most of the stuff I have personally seen is focused on gaming and entertainment. Do you think this is going to go beyond that? And if not, why not? I mean, or if yes, why? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, frankly, gaming is often at the forefront of computing, and it's because you have, at its core, in game developers, you have a bunch of folks who manage to figure out how to stay on the bleeding edge, pulling what is just barely possible and making it work. But lots of things get proven out and then they get pushed into other areas. The reality is that there are a ton of other areas beyond games that need spatial computing. They need AR, VR, MR, XR. They need virtual persistent worlds. They need cloud. They need AI. So yeah, the AEC, architecture, engineering, and construction space, with building information modeling (BIM, that needs that needs much better support for lidar and point clouds. That needs you've got a lot of folks that are doing interesting things there with scanning real world locations, and then they're still struggling to get to the point where they can have multi-user situations to look at to look at things together. Never mind, can they push something that they found off to a cloud to have it analyzed? So yeah, the architecture space is growing a great deal. The entertainment space beyond games, music and animation, movies and TV are diving into virtualized production, and finding that there's a great deal that they can do. But at the same time, military and medical and healthcare, EMTs, there's any number of areas that can use different slivers of this. And so it's all about finding what is the right use case. And right now it's all about experimenting. It's all about small, little versions of things that we will figure out which of them become big and which of them become standard. But frankly, if you look at it right now, everyone has a smartphone in their pocket. That was not the case 10 years ago.
Right.
Um, if you rewind back 20 years ago, not everyone had a phone in general, that they carried around with them. Um, we are getting to the point of where we will have eventually some amount of smart glasses. It takes time. Like you see like people, companies experimenting with watches and other wearables. It's all getting to the point of going, what is the next thing after the smartphone? We don't know the exact shape of it, but that's effectively why we say XR.
Yeah, I think
It's this future thing.
all of these are designed to make your interaction with your
Yeah,
connected world faster, better, more informed.
yeah.
Here's
Always
a
online.
question. Yes, I mean we are always online, whether we like it or not. I mean, I think
Yes.
we are the cusp of And this leads me to my one of my favorite questions that I always like to ask is that if you are in a metaverse, the stuff you do in there, should it have consequences in your real life? For example, I mean, like the Matrix, right? You know, if you get shot and killed in the Matrix, you can have previous. You really think that's is that a possibility in the future, or is honestly, do you think that should happen? I mean, this is more of a ethical, moral question, but it'd be interesting to see if what your thoughts are. You think there should be a scenario where if you're interacting or your avatar or your twin is interacting with people on the metaverse, you still carry the same social moral responsibility from
Yeah,
our existing world into the virtual world.
yeah. So, I mean, being frank, this is a game design question. So, yes,
Yes,
there should always be consequences, and the consequences should
but in
vary
real life,
to,
I mean, like I
um,
stopped playing the game, but I'm still dealing with what I did there. Do you think, oh, what still dealing with what
so
he did to me?
So I don't think that we necessarily need to take the consequences into real life. You know, people have done experiments with like you're playing a first-person shooter and when you get shot, then you're wearing a vest and your vest, shocks you. I don't think that we need to get into that. We don't need to make everything one-to-one there. The more important is if if the virtual is real enough, then frankly, are there consequences within the virtual that give it value? Um, you know, Mistakes, failures have as much value as successes. It's important to learn from the things that you can do and the things that you can't do. And frankly, as a child, we learn to navigate the world, our world, by successes and failures, by doing things and butting up against consequences. So not just moral consequences, but social consequences of what you should and shouldn't do, how you should and shouldn't present yourself. Also physical consequences. You go like, hey, I touched the stove and the stove is hot.
Right,
It's important to have that. And so I don't think that we need to bridge it back to the real world and go, hey, you just got killed in Call of Duty 25, and therefore your bank account goes to zero. We just need to go, there are consequences within the game that have value within the game, and you buy into that when you play that game, that simulation, that thing, so that you don't go off and streak in the virtual world without having the sort of consequences in that you would for streaking in the real world. That
right,
we want to set up behavior that is generally good, and um, has understandable consequences, and you can take risks and you can break that and you can deal with the results of what you do. That's the important thing. That the and actually, I want to bring this back to kind of early notions of VR because academics are often very good about this. They have stressed that we are still creating what we call, and I won't go too far into this, but there's this notion of three levels of presence. The first level that academics have set up, and this was done back in the 90s, is visual presence. That's the thing that we're trying to hit right now. Can we fool the eye? The second level of presence is
that's
social
quite
presence.
easy.
Um,
Fooling the eye.
but it's taken us the last 10 years to be able to do that. But the second
Right,
level of presence is social presence. In social presence, can we feel like we are not the first visual presence is I am there. I can look around. It sounds and it looks like I am somewhere else. The second level of presence is social presence, where you go, we are there together. We are on the cusp of reaching that. But the third level of presence is environmental presence. And that doesn't mean like the environment is there. Environmental presence is where you go, I go into the virtual world and I have a job. I have money, I make money, I do things, I have responsibilities, I grow in this environment. The environment is real. And if you think about that, we have that right now with the web. We are trying to get that with bits of XR and cloud because at this point we have influencers in social media. We have YouTube podcasters and people who excuse me, we have people who effectively have a job, they have a life that is fully in and connected into a 2D interface, an interface around text and video. What we're trying to get to is the ability for presence and the notion of the metaverse, to where you can go in and this is what you see in a bit of Ready Player One, where people have jobs, they have a life in the virtual. They can come out of it and they have a life outside, but they balance their life inside and outside, because at that point it's no longer a game.
Right. So I think to that point, I think one of the places where I see this becoming massively, where this can cross the borders between virtual and real world, is in the field of education. So, for example, I mean, if you are attending a virtual classroom, you're fully immersed in there, you're learning a new skill that has a direct impact on what you do in your real life, and vice versa. I mean, you might pick up some skills or some knowledge in real life, which you take, bringing it back into the metaverse, where it might give an advantage or might help you navigate that scenario better.
Yeah.
So I definitely see that happening more and more, and I think the systems that we use to learn and to grow are going to become more and more immersive as we
Yeah.
go forward. We definitely running short on time. I think we've overshot by a few minutes. So before we allow the audience to ask a few questions to us, can you talk about some of the cool stuff? I know we talked about some of the really cool stuff you and I are working on. Can you elaborate a bit on some of the really cool stuff that you've been working on the last few weeks or so?
Sure. So an example of one thing that I feel is kind of proto metaverse is right now we're working with Roblox. We're their concert content provider. I'm in a hotel in Atlanta because we were just we were just doing some capture work out here. We're working with them to bring artists into Roblox and to set up the virtual concerts. And so in this pandemic time, we're struggling, to get our populations vaccinated. We're still dealing with COVID-19 as a whole, and we have online education. I don't like to call it virtual, because virtual to me is 3D, but we have online education largely in video. We have everybody, trying to figure out vaccine certificates, and we're trying to figure out how we go back to normalcy. In that. I think that there's a big opportunity that a great many of us are seeing, which is that is pushing more of us into the virtual and into not just VR, but AR and online and into video. Like, some people are discovering video meetings for the first time. Like, it's kind of amusing to be discovering audio. Like, if people are discovering audio meetings, I'm like, great, welcome to 2006. I'm happy for you. But the thing is that that's real, because not everybody was doing that. And so seeing people go into audio meetings and video meetings, seeing people go into virtual worlds and experience virtual events and virtual music, the pandemic is forcing us to turn inward, not to always be inward and introverted, but to realize that there's a balance, that we have, that as we're passing information back and forth, that we can create things of lasting value, and that when we don't have time to go to a concert, we can log on and find one. When we don't have the ability to always travel to where education is, we can bring it to us. And so, the thing that I
So
would
is that
say is,
what you working on with Roblox? Are you working on some cool concepts? Are we going to see some
oh yes,
stuff? Um,
bigger
are we
and
going
bigger
to?
artists in the virtual. So yeah. Over the next while,
I have
summer and
to.
fall and beyond.
I have to do a shameless sort of plant in there. I'm here with a friend of mine, and then we both are massive fans of Robert Plant. You think you can do a Robert Plant concert, virtual concert? You think, are you going to be able to talk to? I mean, you're already talking to people in UK. I'd love to see Robert Plant on a virtual concert.
Yeah,
It'd be
and
great.
see like that's actually the thing is, like you have platforms like Fortnite and Roblox, Minecraft, and others that are doing virtual concerts, that are showing that this is possible. We need more platforms, frankly. It's both about partnering with existing platforms, but building newer and better ones. Building platforms, frankly, that are not just like, hey, we've got video. Like, video is wonderful, and we're on it right now. But like, when I want to go into a virtual concert, I want to walk around. I want to see it from different perspectives. I don't want to watch a video feed, because I can do that
You
on
want
my
to
phone.
interact with the audience. Literally, you want the whole
And
mosh
I want an avatar of me. I want to be able to dress up. I want to be able
Yes.
to buy the t-shirt. I want to be able to, do special animated emojis and emotes. I want to be able to express myself in the virtual
Yeah,
because that's
full of
part of
virtual
being
lighter.
there.
Which brings you some of the cool stuff that I've been working on with some of the companies where
Yeah.
again the whole federated system comes into play.
We've got to build this. There's a lot more to build.
Yes. Well, the idea, the notion is that you are able to attend the concert or attend the event in the virtual world as you,
Yeah.
uh, and while you're in there as you, you're interacting with the fellow concept goers of people in
Yeah.
the environment as you, without again compromising your personally identifiable data. And I think that's something that I'm very heavily involved in working with some of the companies doing that stuff. I think we are almost out of time. We've got about 10 minutes. We should probably see if any of the viewers or listeners have any questions. Fabrizio, I think Raf and I would love to open this up for any questions from the audience at this point.
Absolutely. I mean, as you say, I invite people to write in the chat using Q&A, or if you want to join the conversation with Rafael and Carey, just raise your hand. I will invite you on stage and let's do it.
That's awesome. While we're waiting for people, Raf, how can people find you? Social media,
Um,
web, online presence?
yeah. I'm in a bit of social media. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I actually
Is that just
so
Rafael Brown on LinkedIn and Facebook, or
it is. Yeah.
okay?
Yeah. And so like on LinkedIn, beyond being an individual there, I'm also so I run and coordinate and admin several VR, AR, MR, XR groups. There's virtual realities, which is I think that's the largest VR group on Facebook with about 70,000 members. But then, we have a number of smaller, more specialized ones. There's Colors and XR for diversity. There's the XR Alliance, which is based around enterprise, and a handful of others. So, yeah, I try to be active in terms of community building there and exposing people to new technologies. I also, frankly, dive into a number of other groups that
Raf,
that
I
colleagues have.
think you
Oh,
is it
do we
possible
have folks?
to speak up a little bit? I think one of the concerns
Yeah,
people had was they could barely hear you.
yeah. Yeah, I've been holding
Sorry,
this
just
thing
sort
a
of.
little closer. Uh, but yeah, I would say, I mean, like many of us, I have a love-hate relationship with Facebook. I respect them a great deal, and they create value. I just want them to respect our users. So I'm there. I'm over in Xbox and in PlayStation. Um, but yeah, please connect. We're all trying to build community.
So I would say I know some people had issues with the audio, Raf, especially coming from you. I would encourage people to find you on LinkedIn, and are you on Twitter by any chance?
Um, I've actually got to get back
If
onto
somebody
Twitter.
wants to get in touch with you immediately
Um,
and basically talk to you a bit more about some of the things we discussed, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
So LinkedIn and Facebook
Okay.
are the two most immediate. I do need to actually get back onto Twitter.
You should. I mean, there's lots of interesting stuff happening out there. So it's Rafael Brown on LinkedIn and same on Facebook. And I think Fabricio has the links.
Yes,
So
yes.
he's gonna
Your link and your LinkedIn link is on our website, so on the event website. So it's fully accessible for anyone today and in the coming days. Plus, in the next days, also this session will be available as a recording. So I will send you a preview. Once you will approve it, you will be able to share also this video, and I will be able to invite people also to attend your recording.
Fantastic. And I am on LinkedIn and on Twitter, Carey D'Souza. Just find me there. I usually respond pretty quickly. Both Raf and I respond pretty quickly. But yeah, I mean, if you've got questions, this would be a time. If not, we are always happy to jump in and have a one-on-one chat with you. It's been fantastic talking to you, Raf. Fabrizio, thank you for this opportunity. This was great. This was exciting. We had some fun. We had some great conversations.
Thank you, Rafael, and thank you, Carey. Really appreciate and to be part of this event. And another opportunity, if you want to stay a bit more online, you can jump on the table and attendees can meet you and talk with you directly. Maybe we are shy now to jump on a fishbowl, but that could be another opportunity.
So is that in the event?
Yes, yes.
Fabrizio,
After the session, you can go to the lounge. You will see free tables. You can just sit there and ging around for a couple of minutes and see if someone wants to talk with you.
Okay, that's
super.
We do that.
Guys, thanks
Awesome.
a lot.
Thank you so much.
Really, again, for your support. I know we did a lot of job, the special Carey to coordinating and fixing last minute issue, by the way. I really appreciate it and see you around and maybe tomorrow again on this event.
Awesome. Great. Raf and I are going to be in the
sounds good.
lounge for the next couple of minutes if anybody wants to talk to us. But otherwise, thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Wonderful talk.